Coming up, pet psychics. What's your cat really thinking?
Good. All right, good. Welcome to The Next Journey, the adventure travel podcast with me, Andrew St. Pierre White. I'm a prisoner of this hill. Welcome, everybody, to the Next Journey podcast with my special guest, John Cadogan in New South Wales. And I've invited John back because John is a practiced art of presenting, how can I say this nicely? Entertaining bullshit. Well, it's a balance. It's a finely tuned, actually it's not finely tuned at all, but it is a tuned balance. And I thought today we would just have an entertaining time talking about our pet peeves because, John, I know you've got a lot of them because I watch your content.
When you did mention pet peeves, I thought, well, I better just work on this, so I made a list, and unfortunately I couldn't get it down here, so I'm going to have to do most of it from memory. It was just too heavy to get down the stairs and too bulky, it just wouldn't fit. So,
Right. Have you heard of cell phones? And never mind. You probably haven't. So we're going to stick to motoring-related peeves. I think we should, otherwise this could go on a nasty tangent. Am I right in saying that?
You think?
Am I right in one of your pet peeves? Is electric vehicles, is this a generalization or is it just the way people are handling the idea of electric cars?
No, I'm not peeved off at all about electric cars. In fact, I think there's a real usage case for electric cars. If you live in the inner city and you care about urban air quality and you only do short trips and you've got off-street parking so you can charge overnight using baseload power, for example, or you work from home and you can charge during the day using your solar array, then, hey, that's perfectly sensible. Nobody enjoys going to the fuel station and being bombarded with the relentless 2-for-1 Kit Kat meal deals and things of this nature. So electric cars are fine with me, but it's the people that I would describe as evangelists, capital E, capital V, angelists, who treat EVs functionally as if it's a religion.
So you're
right. And look, the thing about religions is if you look at the model for religion, it's pretty clear across all religions that the big fella upstairs requires you to believe, and largely in the absence of evidence. And this is okay I'm completely okay with that on the issue of religion, but I'm not okay with that on the issue of transportation. You've got to be kidding. We're talking about machines moving people from A to B. So if you just have a mindset that is we have to move rapidly to electrification, we have to eliminate internal combustion vehicles, and this is the only way to save the planet, blah, blah, blah. And I am a devout believer in climate change because of the science. But electric vehicles is not the way to solve the problem of climate change. It's just not. And there's, we could be here all day talking about that, but objectively it's not. And there's all these people embracing the electrification of vehicles as if it is some absolute imperative. And okay, if it's an imperative for you, then fine. But let's not be making it an imperative for the rest of us. Let's just make it more of an issue of personal choice. And those of us who want to respect the facts about this stuff, we'd be free to take whatever other meaningful climate action we wanted to, for example, and still drive the vehicles that we thought were appropriate to our various driving situations. I mean, most of your listeners would be extremely miffed if there is a mandate for electric vehicles tomorrow, because most of them won't be able to do the kind of driving that you romanticize.
Do you think that there is enough there are sufficient sensible people making the rules who understand that long distance driving is not a hobby for 99% of the people that do it?
I don't think there's very much appreciation for regional Australia. I think there's a large chunk of the population, and if you draw a Venn diagram of the evangelists and the inner city dweller, there's a lot of overlap between those two circles on the Venn diagram, isn't there? And they've never been to the kind of places that you frequent often and which I've frequented, occasionally, much more often when I was younger. And they don't get it. They don't see why, for example, you might need to buy a Land Cruiser or a Hilux or something of that nature. And like, if you're going to do the Canning Stock route, it's kind of not optional, is it? Where's the electric alternative, and where are the charging points en route?
Yes, that is an extreme case, though. I've witnessed two things that struck me. One was in Seattle, car park outside a store, mall. There were 4 charging points, Tesla charging points, and waiting to use them were at least 20 Teslas, at least. So those people that were charging had gone to do their shopping. When they finish their shopping, they'll come back and get in their car. And so there will be a slow, but there will be a turnaround of those vehicles. So you might have to wait a couple of hours to get to a little bit of a charge in your car to get home. But the other use case was in a little seaside town in Western Australia. They had 2 charge points at this fairly swanky hotel. And there were 4 electric vehicles wanting to be charged. And we went for an evening meal, came back, and there were the same 2 EVs on the charge points. Do you think, and that was 11 o'clock at night, do you think that those owners of those cars are going to come back and say, oh, look, my thing is charged, I'll go down now in my pajamas and be nice about this and move my car out of the charge bay so some other person who's also in their pajamas waiting for a space to charge their car is going to be sitting there all night hoping that the person who's been using the charger for the last 1, 2, 5, 10 hours is going to be courteous enough and move their car? It's just not going to work.
We can't rely on etiquette. I mean, there is no etiquette. We haven't arrived at that. There's various established etiquettes in society. You meet someone face to face, you shake their hand, for example, and there's a deep historical background to always shaking the right hand kind of thing. Make sure you haven't got a weapon in it. That's from where the handshake derives. But we don't have etiquette around electric car charging. And to my knowledge, the only rule about electric car charging, and this is hilarious too, is I think New South Wales and Victoria have the strictest fines in relation to internal combustion vehicles being parked in an electric charging spot. And if memory serves, those fines are in the order of $2,000. If you drive through a red light and you get caught by a camera, the fine in New South Wales is like $452 or something. And to me, those two amounts are just massively out of kilter with the danger or the opprobrium. Like, how can it be $452 to put multiple lives on the line by disrespecting a red light? Because there are real consequences to that. And then $2,000 for parking in an electric charging spot. I don't mind having a fine for doing that, because you shouldn't do that either. But hey, like, the fine needs to be in proportion to the right or the wrong. And this just indicates to me, and we won't go down that tangent, but it indicates to me that the people making the rules are really trying to appease a minority group in society. And this is the kind of consequence that flows from that. And then there's a whole bunch of resentment among the owners, the mainstream owners of combustion cars, because they see this huge penalty that's being foisted upon them. Like, it's just out of kilter with what a reasonable person would consider a fair fine in the circumstances.
Right. So that's interesting, because I watch quite a bit of your content, and I see lots of posts about burning trucks, and kind of made that assumption that this was a major pet peeve. But thank you for clarifying that. I also
Look,
agree
on the issue of burning trucks, right?
Yes.
I think most electric cars are pretty well sorted out from a systematic protection viewpoint when it comes to these thermal runaways. What we're talking about with fires and electric vehicles is low probability events with high consequences. And the problem with those particular trucks is that they've been retrofitted with electric powertrains without the appropriate testing and certification and validation. And what that means is society's the petri dish and we're running a mad experiment. And if you are in close proximity to an electric vehicle that catches fire, and it can be a scooter or an e-bike or it can be a massive truck, it doesn't really matter. There's enough neurotoxic chemicals coming out of most of those fires to present a real danger to anybody in close proximity. So we really do need to sort that out. And if I was an electric car enthusiast, I'd really want the people in charge, pulling the levers, to have processes and practices in place and a public education campaign that says, don't just stand there, you muppet, with your smartphone because it's a visually compelling spectacle. That smoke could disable you permanently because it's full of cobalt and hydrofluoric acid and things of this nature. And you got to sort of move across the wind and then upwind so that it doesn't get on you. It's not even a matter of breathing it sometimes. Your skin will absorb the cobalt compounds and it's really bad for you. Sorry, you want to do something upbeat now?
I think we should do. I definitely think we could, because we were falling down a rabbit hole here. Pet peeves was our subject. So I'm going to bring up a pet peeve of mine, and I think this is a pet peeve, and I am guilty of it. I do it myself. I only hate it slightly more when others do it. And this is YouTube thumbnail clickbait titles. The recent one that I had a go at with a lot of other four-wheel drive enthusiasts presenting ideas of the V8 verse 2.8 Land Cruiser 70 series is calling it the V8 killer, which is just nonsense. They both have pros and cons, and a lot of the videos are nicely presented, and we learn something from most of them, and some of them are just pure paid media hype bullshit. But enough of them are valuable. So then I posted a video saying, this V8 killer hype is bullshit, which...
I watched that video of yours. I thought it was excellent, by the way.
Oh, thank you. But the thumbnail and the title was pure clickbait, and I hate this. I understand that YouTube, you've got a catch, you've got a hook. I get that. That's called a news headline. That's journalism. Yes, but sometimes it is absurd. You do it a bit, but I've never looked at any one of your thumbs and thought, "Oh, John, shut up." But I did with my own the other week.
Yeah, look, I don't try and misrepresent what the content of the video is, but I do put it through the filter of what's the catchiest, funniest, whatever play on words I can put there, because the thumbnail is really something that people look at for maybe, I don't know, half a second or a second, and they decide whether to click or not. And if you don't make it catchy, then your video is going to fail. I mean, if you don't lead with the right story in the news bulletin, people change channels. So this is the same concept. Where I would draw the line there, and I agree with you on this pet peeve, is that if the title misrepresents what the hell the video is about just to get people to click on it, then that's hateful.
Okay. So I've admitted to that. What have you got to tell me? Share with us some of your pet peeves.
Okay. I'll give you a tiny little one, like a workshop one. Is it okay if we stray into the workshop domain?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
I think a lot of your viewers would be
Yeah.
working in their garage/workshop at the weekend, doing
Yes.
various things on 4x4s.
Yes.
I hate, one of my pet peeves is the way you can buy some of the most dangerous tools from Bunnings or wherever and just take them home and use them with no training, right? Like, and the 5-inch angle grinder is the poster boy for affordability versus mayhem, the ability to hurt yourself, right? I see all these people, they fall into two categories. They're either wearing no PPE, right? And you see YouTubers do it. They take the guard off an angle grinder because it gets in the way of them looking at the blade. And I'm going, how's that Russian roulette working out for you? And then you see these other people who go over the top with the PPE. And for example, they wear gloves around an angle grinder, like rotating machinery and gloves don't mix. And it's amazing to me that you can just waltz into Bunnings and buy something like an angle grinder, which is preposterously dangerous. And you can take it home and use it and put yourself at risk, like properly at risk. And there's no check or balance in that at all. And I really hate that. Like I work around machinery all the time, like lathes and mills, which are proper murder machines. If you've got loose clothing around a lathe or something, it'll suck you in and puree you. And you've got to have this sort of systematic framework for working with tools. And I don't know where your enthusiastic punter would go to get that. Because if you work in industry, you kind of, it's like this, you will do it this way. Someone walks around and chips you, if you're not doing it properly. But in the garage, you can be at risk by virtue of abject ignorance, and there's really no mechanism to get the training that I can see, at least not readily available kind of for free.
But now you're suggesting that there should be legislation and training for a basic piece of, because you could say the same about a hammer. If you're banging steel on steel with a hanger and you're not wearing some kind of eye protection, a good mate of mine lost his left eye and was doing exactly that. And and this is going to turn your stomach, a shard of steel that long went straight through the pupil and then bedded itself into the actual skull. And it's cringeworthy, but this is what happened to him. And I'd known the guy for years and years and years, and I noticed that he would wear these glasses, but they had lenses, but the lenses were just flat metal. And I noticed once, like some, in fashion photography, you'll have the studious-looking pretty lady and her glasses on that makes her look like, very intelligent and everything. But they're actually flat glass. Now, those are reading glasses. These are reading glasses. I'm talking about a flat lens that are just there to give them. But if you look at an angle, you realize it's a flat piece of glass. And I saw on John, and I thought, John, those glasses have got no lens. And he said, no, they're for eye protection. He said, it only happens to me once. And I noticed that he would only ever clean the one side. I think he did it for a laugh because the other side was all full of smudges. So he would pick the glasses off with his finger on his eye that didn't work, and then clean the other one, and clean the other one, and not clean this one, and put them back. It was quite comical, actually. And he told me this horrifying story.
I get what you're saying. There's 100 different horrifying stories about injuries and things of that nature. I'm not calling for legislation about that. I don't think we need any more of that. I just really like it if the manufacturers of power tools, for example, could include some more meaningful safety advice. Because, you get the manual and it treats everything as if it's equally important. Like, check the power cord is as important as everything else in the safety advice. And the safety advice with an angle grinder, incidentally, generally does not include stay out of the plane of rotation, right? So if there's one valuable thing that I can tell your viewers today, it's that if you're using an angle grinder and you're looking down the blade, cutting something like it's a straight line, you are at risk. Do not do that. All rotating machinery from a lathe to an angle grinder, you got to get out of the plane of rotation so that if mayhem does ensue, you're not standing in the firing line. And I just wish there was some avuncular influence who could reach out like this and grab you by the lapels and say, hey, dude, don't do it that way.
We're supposed to learn that at school and workshop. And I remember at school, I don't know if they still do that at schools, we had workshop and metal workshop as part of our curriculum in the UK. And we were taught how to use tools. And
yeah, we did that too. But I think a lot of that stuff is by the by. Now, I see a whole bunch of young Australians who don't really seem to me as if they could pick up any basic tool and use it with vestigial competency. And I don't want to sound like a cranky old man just railing against the younger generation, because I like younger people. They're going to be looking after me when I'm in a Zimmer frame, you know. But I don't think there's a focus on that kind of thing anymore.
Because it's one of the great joys of life. A workshop, a Saturday with nothing else to do, and a project. Honestly, it's
yeah. When I bought my lathe, the guy at the machinery shop, he said, "What do you want to make with it?" I said, "Swarf, dude." And it took him a while to get that. You know, I didn't have a particular project in mind. I wasn't going to make a space shuttle. I just wanted to turn, you know, big bits of metal into smaller bits of metal and have lots of swarf all over the ground.
All curly, all over the place.
Yeah, preferably some real dark blue swarf too. That's the best. That's
really
the best
hot
swarf
stuff. Yes. Excellent.
Now, I think it's your turn.
All right. Pet peeves. Australia, I've lived here 7 years now. And when I first watched your channel, I thought that MALS slogan was a bit harsh. Because I thought, yeah, it's not shit. Australia's not shit. Yeah, it's got its problems like any other country, but it's not shit. So don't call it, you know. And then you paid me a compliment and said that I was one of the people I was contributing to making it less shit. And I thought, okay, well, I'll let him say that, you know. But the bureaucracy and, bureaucracy and is sometimes absurd. So when you have a swimming pool at your home, every 4 years, somebody will come around and inspect it for child safety. Now, this is beyond absurd. I have a pool with no fence around it because when the house was built, the laws were not in place to need a pool fence. So they said, well, all of the windows can't open more than this. Okay. And all opening must have automatic return slide. So the slide automatically comes back, which all it consists of is a tiny little piece of elastic and a tiny little hook. The wind could blow it off, but that's sufficient. On the back of my property is a gate. It's an electric gate. It's battery backup power. You open it with a remote. Doesn't qualify. It has to be opened with tools. So I said to her, so this here is a tool. It's an electronic tool, but it's a tool that I need to press because I can't open that gate. That gate is locked unless I press it. Yes, but what happens if, I kid you not, a child finds the remote on the street, presses the right button, there are 4 buttons on it, you could press the right one, the gate opens, it walks into your property, climbs down some very steep steps, I mean they're steep steps, 4 steep steps down to there, and falls into the pool. Okay, so, and I said to her, so what's the solution? No, you have to need a spanner. So the spanner is a tool, but the remote is not a tool. Yes, and what happens if there's a power failure and it stays open? I said, well, 2 things. If power failure did affect it, which it doesn't because it's battery powered, but let's say it did affect it, then if the child press the button, the gate wouldn't open because there would be no power to open it. Now, the power supply might go off after the child has opened it, and now it doesn't automatically close. I said, do you realize how ridiculous you're being? And she said, Mr. White, I'm just following the rules. I understand. I'm following the rules and I'm doing my job. So I said, okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little metal strap on that gate that I have to remove with a tool. And I showed it to her. She said, that's fine. Of course, I'm free to take it off, but I must put it back when she arrives, and then she'll take it off. I have subsequently built a actually very attractive pool fence. So it's kind of glass panel fence, because unlike the government rules, I actually want to prevent my grandchildren from falling into the pool. I actually want to stop it. Not look like I'm stopping it, but actually stopping it. Do you know that I've got an inspection later this year, and I still, even though I've put a fence, I still need to make sure that my doors automatically close and open. I cannot get my head around the absurdity. There is a friend of mine with the same thing, Paul. No, that fence, and is it a hibiscus or a plumbago? I think it's a plumbago, but it is huge. It's 1.5 meters thick. For a man to get through that, he would need 2 hours and a huge panga. But a child could get through, no problem, and get to the pool. Nope, not qualified.
Yeah.
Speechless.
Okay, so the concept of make Australia less shit, I don't mean that Australia is the most shit country. That's ridiculous. But I think wherever you live, there's always a bit of shit quotient, right? And I don't think many people would disagree that the shit quotient in Australia is increasing, and it could be less. So my objective is to motivate more people to get up every day and just make the joint a little bit less shit. That doesn't seem... I'm not running the joint down. I'm trying to make it less shit. Less shit is a virtue. You know, it's almost like the second law of thermodynamics says that environments get more random. You know, there's less available energy in environments over time if there's a boundary in the environment. So what you've got to do to prevent that from happening is to inject more energy. And I'm just kind of in the energy injection mode of making the joint less shit. And I think if everybody got up, particularly the people that we're not going to talk about on this podcast, at the monument to the death of integrity in public life in Canberra there, if they could just get up and make the joint a little bit less shit every day, I think there'd be a lot of frowns going upside down.
I get it. Because I came from a country where, and I've lived in several countries where, you know, it was a kind of a soft landing arriving in Australia, even compared to the UK. Such a soft landing. For example, moving to the UK, none of the banks would let me open an account, even though I had an international account with nationwide bank, nationwide branch. Said no, and why not? And they couldn't give me an example of why not. And I went to 4 banks, and eventually, about 2 months later, managed to get lawyers. Lawyers said, "No, not a problem," and they sorted us out. That was the difference. In Australia, the difference was the truck arrived in the UK, all our stuff in the back of the container, and it drove out. And my phone rang. "Hello, Mr. White. I am so-and-so from Combank in Joondalup. I believe you're moving to Joondalup." "I'm suspicious now." "Yes." "I believe you're moving to Joondalup." "I am. Do you need a bank account?" "Yes, please." "What? How many people in your family, and who will need bank accounts?" 5. "Right, 5. Can you give me their names?" I did. She said, right, you come to the branch, and when you arrive, all you will need to do is bring your passport so we can verify your identity, and we'll have 4 accounts open and 4 cards ready for you.
How good is that?
How good is that? And that's what I mean by a soft landing. Landing in England was like an overloaded C-130 with a nose wheel missing. And this was not a Qantas pilot, a Emirates pilot coming in with an A380, just greasing it on. That's the difference. So when I heard less shit, I thought, this place is not shit, mate. And besides, we live in Western Australia, which is far less shit than where you live.
I'd agree with that. I think shit quotient varies around the joint, and I'd suggest that Sydney's is the highest in the country, and we definitely need to do something about that. But on a more practical peeve front, one of my pet peeves is the deep hatred of the number of Australians who are obsessed with the price of fuel. Are you outraged at the price of fuel, Andrew, or is it just a necessary thing to facilitate your quasi-nomadic lifestyle from time to time, and also, getting down to the shops and picking up the groceries? Are you obsessed about it, or are you kind of, okay, just need fuel?
I'm fairly about it because there's price gouging and profiteering across the world, but that is the nature of capitalism. The opposite of capitalism is even worse. But so it does bug me, but I'm not obsessed about it by any means.
Well, there are so many people who are, and it's extremely difficult to get the message across that we have, last time I looked, the 4th cheapest fuel in the whole OECD. And the only reason that fuel is more expensive in other parts of the world, like, for example, Italy or the United Kingdom or something, like the liquid costs about the same everywhere that you'd care to look on Earth. The big difference is taxation, and we should be rejoicing in the street about the low level of taxation that we pay on fuel, and that's what keeps the price relatively cheap on the world stage. So I think we're actually very lucky about the price of fuel, and the people complaining about it really need to have their radars recalibrated.
Because if you think about the cost of fuel, they're going to dig it up out of the ground. It's really, really, really deep. They bring it to the surface, then they pump it through miles and miles of pipes and systems to refine it. And then they put it in ships or trucks or whatever, or trains. They transport it right across the country, and then it gets into more trucks and trains and eventually ends up at the Bowser. That's not, we're not milking cows here. It's a huge endeavor. So you look at those fuels, and also if you drive a nice car, let's face it, people who drive nice, I've still got my old Range Rover, and every now and again, not in the summer months because it's a million degrees in Perth, but you climb into that thing and it smells a bit and it vibrates a bit, and it's just a joy to drive. And I just don't give a damn about the cost of the petrol because we love cars. So the price of the fuel is not really the price of building my four-wheel drive is far eclipse any thought about how much I spend on the fuel. So I don't begrudge the fuel cost, because the reward of getting in the car and driving it because we love cars means that we don't think much about our fuel. I think people that are just using their Toyota Corolla or their Kia, whatever, because it's an appliance and they need to get around, they might be a little bit peeved with the cost of getting around, because they're not interested in the car on how it wells. They're just interested in the fact that it mustn't use too much fuel and must be cheap to run. And one of the big advantages of electric cars, which is not really an advantage at all necessarily.
Well, here's the thing. If you're in that Corolla or some other car, let's just say hypothetically that you live 5Ks from the nearest servo, from the nearest shopping centre, then it's 1 billion degrees currently in Perth, and it's 1 billion% humidity currently in Sydney. So neither neither option's particularly attractive. So if you live 5 k's from the shops, you can get in your Bommy Corolla and turn the air on and be at the shops in 5 minutes at 60 k's an hour, and then you can just load your groceries into the back, and then you can drive home. And if the consumption is 1 litre for every 10 k's, which would be ballpark average for Australia, that's going to cost you, like, you'll get change out of $2, right? The alternative is get your wheelbarrow, right? Walk 5 k's in the 1 billion% humidity or the 1 billion-degree Perth summer, and then load up the groceries and make sure you run home if you want the ice cream not to melt, right? And if you'd go through all of that to save like less than $2, then you're a different dude than me, because when you look at fuel on a value basis, what it does for you, like what you were talking about with the Range Rover and the various vehicles you build, is like liberation. It's a liberating thing to be able to do that. But even if you've got the Bommy Corolla in the height of summer, it's certainly better than saving the $2, isn't it?
We are so lucky to live in this era.
Oh, totally.
I mean, I own 3 4-wheel drives. One of them's not on this continent, but I own 3. Who needs 3?
No, you've got more mobility than a Roman emperor. Like, look at it in perspective. It's amazing. Like, living in this era is amazing. It's also pretty good if you hurt yourself. Like if you break your femur in 3 or 4 places because you do something stupid up a ladder, much better living now than in the 12th century.
I know we are very fortunate to live in this time of the world. I know the world's going to hell with all of this shite that's around. It's scary if you get too deep into it, but we are still so lucky. I mean, I went to the ER the other day, and I'm a very healthy guy, and then I had a little issue, and I went out, and yeah, it took me the day. I spent the day there. It wasn't a fun day, but I was sorted with a medicine, and they obviously knew what they were doing. And I said, Mr. White, this is what it is. Have you had it before? No, I haven't. And he said, okay, well, is it a function of age? He said, maybe. I was fixed in 2 days. In the 12th century, I'd be dead in 2 days.
Oh, yeah. Look, I've never been in front of more doctors in my life than I have for the last 18 months, because my father got diagnosed with melanoma, right? And he'd seen a lot of his colleagues go, because he worked outside all his life as a surveyor, and he'd seen a lot of his former colleagues succumb to melanoma over the preceding decades, and it was pretty terrifying for him, I'm sure. But they've got this miraculous new treatment now. It's called immunotherapy. The 2 Australians of the Year brought that into the limelight recently to some extent. But he goes into the hospital once a month for these infusions, and it ramps up your immune system, and your immune system goes looking for the microscopic disease that would otherwise metastasize through your body. And 18 months later, he's still complaining about having to go for his infusions, whereas if it had been 10 years ago, he would have lasted about 3 months, So the pace of that nature of improvement is miraculous, and it's really inspiring when you see it, even though it's a bleak, if you look at it from the top down, it's a fairly bleak sort of thing to be doing all the time, but better to be alive and kicking and still going for a walk every day aged 88 than the alternative, I'd suggest.
We have a lot to be grateful for, to be honest. We do. And we live in a country where, compared to so many others, we have a huge amount of freedom. I have a lot of people on the channel from America. Every now and again I'll have a go at, because of the negative press received during COVID about Australia, kind of hanging on the freedom banner. You're not free. Well, none of us are free. But here in Australia, I think we're freer than most. I mean, I can drive for 40 minutes and find myself on a beach with absolutely nobody around. Well, maybe somebody over there, or maybe. We're free. We're lucky, and we have sunshine most of the
Yeah, I
year.
know. It's amazing the conversations that I have with Americans, because they can't come to grips with concepts like, in Australia, it's illegal to carry a weapon for self-defense, right? That's just a fact. Like, it's illegal in every state to do that. It'd be a mistake to tell a police officer that you had anything in your car that you were going to use for self-defense, because, like, in a self-defense scenario, you're allowed to use proportionate force, but you're not allowed to you're not allowed to equip yourself. If you're going to use a weapon in a proportionate way to defend yourself, then it'd want to be an improvised one. Otherwise, that's kind of illegal. And Americans have a very difficult time bending their brain around that kind of concept, because over there, in some places, you can have an AR behind the driver's seat, and you can be concealed carrying a Glock 40, and you can have a flick knife in a holster on your belt, and all of those things will get you inside in Australia. But on balance, I think we've got a better system. And when you run the numbers, the risk of homicide, succumbing to homicide by gunshot, is like 10 times higher per capita in the United States. So it's funny the way rules work around the world, and the concept of freedom. I would argue that we're freer as a result of
I would too.
that framework that we've got.
I would too. Yes. I'll give you an example of that. I was in the States several years ago. I was driving a Sportsmobile, E-Series Ford van with a V10 in it. It used so much fuel. It was just unbelievable. That's not what the point of the story is, but we camped next to I won't remember the name of the river, but I think it was on the Nevada border. Camped next to the river, wild camping. And the chap who actually ran Sportsmobile at the time, and a friend of mine, 3 vehicles and wild camping. And I asked, are we safe? Looking down at our cluster of 3 little vehicles. And he said, oh, absolutely, we're absolutely safe. And I said, well, what would happen if we did have a confrontation with somebody, if somebody came along? Because there are quite a few people around. We've been seen. He said, we've got weapons. Okay, we've got weapons. Should I feel good about that? He said, yeah, but everybody's got weapons. I said, can you show me the weapons? Absolutely. Walked back down, and there was Alan, and I said to Alan, are you're carrying a firearm? Yes. More than one? Yes. How many? 4.
4. He's only got 2 hands, dude.
4. I was just intrigued by this. So I said, what? And he said, I've got this and that. And then the one I remember was an automatic rifle in a beautiful case. And he said, I'll show it to you. And he pulled it out, and it was in a locked thing in his van. He locked it out and opened it up, and it was this beautiful weapon. I mean, it was just work of art, this thing. Beautiful. I can understand why there was this attraction for this thing. And I said, what do you use it for? He said, self-defense. I'm struggling with this, and So I said, so you're saying we're safe? And he said, look, they'll come. Anybody causing shit was going to come and look, and they're going to see a Sportsmobile, and then another Sportsmobile, and a nicely equipped Tacoma, and they're going to make an assumption. And the assumption is going to be that those guys have got some shitload of weapons in them. They will make that come to that conclusion on their own. You think they're going to give us shit? That's why we're safe. It's an extraordinary thing, but that's why we're safe. It's like the mutually assured destruction of two opposing nations, both having nuclear weapons. It's the same principle.
Yeah, but it's weird. See, when you're used to living in this framework and you go over to that framework, it's some weird things can happen to you, some really dangerous weird things. Like I was in Detroit with a colleague and we meandered just a couple of blocks in the wrong direction, and all of a sudden it was like the wild, wild west, and we were being clocked. There was no question we were being clocked. These old Cadillacs are going past, and they're full of African American dudes who, had they got out, would have certainly been packing whatever weapons and would have also blocked out the sun.
I was going to say, huge, like the eclipse of the sun.
Yeah, it would have been a total eclipse. It would have been in more than one way. And it's just freaky the way, like, Sydney is not a particularly friendly city in my view, but there's not too many places where if you walked around as a tourist, you would be at risk because you were just, quote unquote, in the wrong spot. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, there might be the odd more dangerous area, but we're talking about places in cities like Chicago and Detroit where if you're in the wrong place, you will be attacked. Like you'll be mugged, you'll be robbed, whatever. You probably find yourself in the ER if you're lucky, kind of stuff.
I go camping, wild camping in Australia, and I never feel the slightest twinge of, and maybe I should do if I'm near some places. I know some places are a bit dodgy, but I feel there's a total sense of calm and and if somebody sees me, I'm probably just going to ignore me. Whereas I wouldn't do that, for example, in South Africa. I would do it in their neighbouring country in Botswana. I would do it, not near the main towns, but certainly in the wild areas, I'd do it. And they're tribal people around. When I say tribal, they live in their traditional tribal way. And they're the friendliest people you can possibly imagine. And they almost thrill at the idea that you've come to visit their little spot on earth. And they're wonderful and no threat at all. But in South Africa, I had one very nasty situation in South Africa. I was quite involved many years ago with my church, and we were doing a little project, and I had to go and visit. And so I said to the guy, okay, where are you going to be? I'm going to collect you, and then we're going to go and visit this family. And we're going to take some stuff. Well, I can't remember the details, but he said, okay, come back down that road. Yeah, you know that road? Yeah, I know that road. And I said, there's a huge gum tree, and I'll be under the gum tree. So I drove down. It was like light rain. I drove down this hill. Oh, where's that gum tree? I'm sure I've seen it down there. And the next thing I saw shouting. I heard shouting. And there were youths running across the road. And then one of them threw a rock, missed, and then another one threw another rock. And my first reaction was, I'm so glad it's raining, because I just whacked that handbrake. And because I was probably doing about 60, and because it was raining, I knew that I would get out of there. And I escaped. And I went directly to the family, and he was a policeman. And I told him of the incident, and he said, Andrew, you went to France. Now, France was a small little enclave outside a town called Pietermaritzburg, where he said, when we go there and we get out of our car, we draw our weapons when we get out of the car. He said, we don't go there. We'll only go there after somebody's been murdered. Because to go there at any other time, we will be attacked. So we don't provoke it. And we just have to say, we have no choice but to say, let them kill each other. We are powerless. So when somebody dies and there's a shooting, which is every week or so, they'll then arrive and they will walk with their 9mm in their hands. Because if they don't, they will be attacked. And that's why I drove down in my little white Corolla on a Sunday afternoon.
How do we get a job like that? Jeez. I don't know how the cops in Australia do it. It's pretty tough for them as well. And it's just that exposure to two things, the scumbag element of society, sort of relentlessly dealing with them, and also just interacting endlessly with people having the worst days of their lives. Like, you'd have to be pretty tough to cope with that unscathed, I'd suggest.
I take my hat off to them, honestly, and every now and again you get a pain in the ass belligerent fool who just wants to make you. But that's rare. That's not that common. That's unusual. Most of them are. My nephew was recently resigned from the police force in Victoria, and he was going to be a career policeman. It was the political bullshit that kind of drove him out, which was because he was absolutely dedicated, and he would tell stories and blase, oh, there was this happening and that happening, and you and I think that's an extraordinary thing to actually have to deal with on a daily basis, and yet they're used to it. I'm having enormous respect for sometimes the police, what they have to handle. I remember
do you feel as if we've strayed sufficiently from the path of peevedness?
Yeah, we have, but still, it's entertaining.
I'm okay. I'm comfortable in an environment where the boundaries are malleable.
Give us another one of your pet peeves.
Okay, well, this is a really simple one. This is back into the home shed, right? And I guarantee that somebody out there is going to have one of these, right? Digital calipers. I freaking hate digital calipers. I hate them because they always malfunction. When you need to measure something, if the batteries are flat or the display dies, they're about as useful a measurement device as a 12-pound hammer. And you don't need that resolution anyway, because most digital calipers will resolve on the display down to 10 microns. And if you don't know what 10 microns is, a millimeter is 1,000 microns. So 100 microns is a tenth of a millimeter, which is roughly the diameter of a human hair. So a caliper will measure a tenth of the diameter of a human hair, allegedly. Only you can't hold it that well, measuring whatever. So that level of resolution is completely useless. And the normal ones, without the digital, just a vernier caliper, are almost as accurate. Like they'll resolve down to 0.2 of a millimeter, 0.02 of a millimeter, 20 microns. And all you got to do is learn how to use them, and the batteries never go flat and the display never fails. So people relying on digital calipers and digital calipers generally, I freaking hate that. I like these ones. These are the best. You can measure to 20 0.2, like it's 20% of the diameter of a human hair. Come on.
But surely to get that accuracy out of that caliper, you need really good eyesight. John is now clipping his reading glasses onto his nose.
Done.
I have a digital caliper and I use it more than my manual one because it's...
Really?
But I'm mostly using it to... what kind of bolt will I need here? How big is this drill bit? That's mostly...
Yeah, so when was the last time you needed to resolve down to a tenth of a millimeter? Yeah, well, it's dead easy to read these down to a tenth of a millimeter. And
a tenth of a millimeter? Yeah, okay, yeah. I could go down to a tenth of a... could I go down to a tenth of a millimeter? Probably not quite that much.
I'll tell you a scenario where you might need that. Okay, if you were going to drill a M12 by 1.75 hole in a piece of steel, which every man should be able to do, by the way. If you were going to do that, the tapping drill would be 10.2. And if you've got some drills that are a bit scuffed on the shank where the size is laser etched, you might not be able to tell the difference between 10.5, which is in a standard drill index, and 10.2, which you have to buy as a specialist thing to drill that hole, right? And you can get away with an M12, tapping an M12 hole in a 10.5 millimeter. You can get away with tapping, get it right, that thread in a 10.5 millimeter hole, right? But it's better if you use 10.2. So if you've got two drills lying there and they're a bit scuffed up on the shank, that's when you might need to resolve down to a tenth of a millimeter to tell them apart.
I've probably gone that. That's probably the limit to. I've probably gone to a tenth, and not I mean, I know the 4.8 and the 4.5. That's when I'll pick them out and say, oh, yeah, okay, that's a 4.8. But I'm not doing a lot of fine work, and it's not that common that I'm tapping threads.
Mm.
Yeah, interesting peeve. Really not on my radar, even vaguely.
Well, good. I'm glad I surprised you with that. Like, I am fascinated by this world of machining, right? Because it involves the perception of distances that you can't see, and small amounts of distance make a huge difference to things like fit. Like, if you're going to press a shaft into a boss of some description, you don't want it to come apart, then you'd probably want about 6 thousandths of an inch worth of interference. A millimetre is about 39 thousandths of an inch. So we're talking about roughly a sixth of a millimetre worth of overlap between the shaft and the hole that it's going in the boss. And to achieve that, you might want to chill one bit out and heat the other bit up just to free it up. But once you do that, with just 6 thousandths of an inch worth of interference, you're never getting them apart again. To me, that's awesome, and it's fascinating. And being able to do it and measure that stuff, and the dudes who figure that out all the time, like there are various press-fitted components in the gearbox of your car, for example, that's pretty clever.
I don't have too many pet peeves in the workshop. It's when I'm dealing with other people that I have pet peeves, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my pet peeves is other people.
Just
generally. The rest of humanity.
Yeah.
How about people who don't check their tyre pressure ever?
Ever.
Like, your car gets serviced once every 12 months. Like, can't they do it then? Do you train spot as you drive around and just see the number of people driving around with at least one dangerously underinflated tyre? It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't even know how much air to put in the tyre.
Yeah.
I hate that because it's such a liability. It feels okay when you're driving along just normally, but you can swerve around a kid or stop for a kangaroo or something. Like, come on.
Well, what they do is they go to the servo, they plug in the thing, and hopefully the person that's preset the pressure on the little machine is the same kind of tire, car, wheel configuration, or it'll just explode the tire.
But that's only the people who actually go to the servo and do that. There's a whole subculture of driving society that never checks that stuff and just kind of hopes for the best.
What do you think of the driving standard? You've driven in many countries around the world. I hear complaints about Perth drivers, and I think Perth drivers, generally speaking, yeah, they're okay. Yeah, you get idiots, of course, P-platers in their Nissan Tritons and whatever. But generally speaking, you do get the overtaking lane hog, but they're not every day. It's every couple of days. It's not. What's it like in New South Wales in your view?
In Sydney, it's terrible. Like, George Carlin had this joke about IQ. It was like, how dumb the average American is? And the audience is kind of nodding and going, yeah. And he said, well, half of them are even dumber than that, right? And that's kind of like driving. Like, the average driver in Sydney is pretty terrible, doesn't pay enough attention, isn't far enough ahead of the curve. That's the average driver. And half of them are worse than that. And the ones I particularly can't stand are the ones who just can't keep up in non-challenging situations. They're just, I don't know what is captivating them in the car, or whether it's just a lack of skill, or whether they've grown up in a digital world where they haven't done anything physical involving time, speed and distance previously. And this is the most, challenging spatial thing they've ever had to come to grips with. But I really do feel, without wanting to sound like a cranky old dude shouting at the sky,
too late, mate.
I really do feel like the whole driving standard, at least here in Sydney, is on the way down. And it's like a bit like in Top Gun, where the F-18 screams altitude, altitude, terrain, terrain, pull up, like that. We're kind of there. And some people are anyway. And I don't know how we fix that either, but it kind of needs addressing because your grandkids and all the kids in the area are just a few steps away from interacting with people like that.
My driving peeves are always long distance, and you get the driver that it becomes mesmerized with the car in front of them, and it's often me. So I'll be doing 107 or 104 or 109, whatever comfortable. I've set the auto cruise or whatever. If it's a long and straight, I'll put on the auto cruise and I'll listen to a good book, and then I'll look and there's a Camry, a dark blue Camry behind me, and it's half a K away, and then it's a quarter of a K, and then it's right behind me, and I'm doing 105, and it's right behind me. And now I can no longer listen to my audiobook because I have to pay attention because I've got this idiot behind me. Why is he there? So here's this long stretch, and it's straight as an arrow, and you can see for 2 kilometers, and I'm sitting there at 105. No, they're not going to overtake me. I want them to overtake me because they're obviously going a little faster than me. So I will click off the cruise control and ease off on the accelerator. No, gently, no fast, nothing that's going to surprise them. And I'm down to 89 kilometers an hour, and they sit there. And they sit there for a kilometer. Then, and I see ahead the road's starting to curve. Now they're going to overtake. They're going to wait for the curve, and then they're going to overtake. And so often, I'll be now staying my lower speed because I want them to just get past me. I'll start then they wake up, and then they'll overtake on a blind rise, on a curve, and I will see them coming out, and I will just apply brakes because I think, well, just let them get in. Just let them get in before somebody comes around. A few close calls, but why do people become mesmerized with the car in front of them to the point where they stop thinking? That's probably my biggest single pet peeve when driving. It's very bad in Australia.
But driving's about making a series of tactical decisions, right? It's like perceiving the environment around you and then reacting to it. And psychologists call that an OODA loop, OODA. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. We all do it. That's how you go through life. You observe the environment you're in, you orient yourself to it, and you decide what you're going to do, and then you act. And the more tightly constrained the environment becomes, the more demand there is on that OODA feedback thing. And I just think a lot of people who are driving, in particular long distances, they turn into zombies, and it's somehow comforting just to sit an inch and a half with their nose virtually up your crack, metaphorically driving along. That's kind of better for them because they don't have to make any decisions. They just kind of keep their bumper right there on yours. And the funniest thing of all with people of that nature, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I've experienced that many times, is that when you let them around and they bugger off, you go back and set the cruise on 106 or 107 or something, and then you catch them. Right? Because when they don't have something to bookmark themselves against, they drop the ball and they're kind of really slow again. And then I don't get that because having driven long distances a lot, I like to be there like this far below where I'm going to get in trouble with law and order and just cruise like that. And I want to get where I'm going. So I'll bookmark my speed with a GPS. And if the if the reported speed of the Speedo is 113 or 114, and that translates to a real speed of 108 on the freeway in 110 zone, I'll just set the car in like 113 indicated, 108 actual, and sit on that because that's the most efficient way to get from A to B without stopping at the side of the road saying, but officer, I thought I was going blah, And I think a lot of people are like that, but it's just frustrating because there are no checks and balances, and in our driving culture, it's kind of okay to be incompetent. Whereas in Germany or Italy or something, it's not. It's really not. You drive around Germany and Italy, and they're on it. You know, if you're goofing off looking at the scenery in Tuscany and you're doing like 8Ks under the limit or something, all of a sudden there's some 25-year-old chick in a Fiat 500 that's 20 years old, and she's right up your date, and she's flicking the lights and telling you to get off the road kind of thing, because they've got that kind of driving culture where competency really matters. But unless it matters to you personally because it matters, in Australia, it's okay to be an incompetent tool behind the wheel, and I kind of hate that.
You've driven in Germany. Have you driven in Germany?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a different thing. You have to be just a little bit aggressive, but it's not aggressive like, "Arr." It's aggressive. Pay attention because things are happening, and you're going to have to get into the swing of things, match other people's speeds, and keep going. I was invited to the Allrad Abenteuer show, and they flew me into Frankfurt, and I said, I don't want some crappy hire rental car. I want something nice, eh? They said, don't worry, we'll get you something nice. I said, I want a G-Wagon for whatever. And they said, it's going to be nice. It's not going to be that nice. So whatever. And they gave me a Seat, equivalent to the GTI. Climbed into this thing and got onto the Autobahn. And well, I think I was sitting at the Autobahn about 190, 195 or so. And I was in the fast lane, and then actually quite frequently actually had to get into the slower lane, even doing 190. And the Porsches and the Range Rovers and things were coming past me. But it was a buzz. It was a buzz because everybody was a bang. You do not stay in that fast lane unless you are the fastest car. So that you would get into the fast lane, overtake somebody, back into, and then there was this flow. And I remember many years ago with my brother, also in Germany, we had dropped off a car and we were catching a train, and it was icy. It was at night and it was cold. I remember brushing our way. We were walking to the station, and not a lot of traffic about, very, very icy. And along comes this Golf, and he's kind of sliding a little bit, and we just kind of watch him, and then he loses it and then gets it again. And he's going down the high street like this. You see him tapping his brakes, and like down the side street. Whoop. I thought that's rally driving stuff, and it's probably an ordinary bloke, used to driving in winter, and he wasn't having fun. He was going home probably, but the fact that he could, almost lose it, catch it, and it was beauty to behold, just this ordinary Golf being driven so well. And that's the culture. I thought it was fantastic just seeing that.
Well, see, I've been to Germany several times and driven there every time I've been there. And we're doing a story with Today Tonight about vehicle technology, and we're doing it with BMW. So we fly into Munich because the Welt is in Munich. So we fly in there, and then we pick up a vehicle from BMW headquarters, and the young reporter I was with had never been on the Autobahn, right? But he lived in Sydney mostly for most of his life, and been subjected to all of the advertising that you see about road safety in Australia. Like, reductio ad absurdum of that is speed kills, right? So BMW press cars are limited to 215 or 220 k's an hour, so they've installed a limiter to prevent journalists from driving at 300 down the Autobahn. And we go out in the Autobahn, and I whip up to the limit, and so let's say arbitrarily it's 215 or whatever it was, 215 or 220. He was terrified. Like, there were fingerprints in the armrests, you know what I mean? Like, and that's just a cultural thing, because the thing that was terrifying me more than anything else about doing that was the focus that you need to have on the rear view mirror, and the fact that it's on that side instead of the one that you're used to. And, coming to grips with all that, because as you say, there's someone in an S class and they're doing like 280 and they expect you to be out of their way.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand. I can understand the fear. I just on a slight tangent. I once flew with an airline pilot, and he was sitting next to me in my motor glider. And I said to him, and I'd calculated what I was going to do. And I said to him, I can fly with the engine off in a motor glider. And he went, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, and then I shut it down. And he went, I pointed at the altimeter and the vertical speed indicator, and we were going up. He went, we're going up. That moment of fear to that moment of disbelief. And he was a 737 captain, but he'd never been in an aeroplane where the engine turned off.
Yeah, there'd be ramifications to turning the engines off in a 737.
Yes, and it was wonderful just to watch him kind of suddenly, and then relax, and then we had a wonderful time. And so on a different note. John, it's been a pleasure as usual. We've cracked an hour and 15. Your last peeve before we wrap this up.
My last peeve is, well, this might get a few of your listeners offside, but caravans. I've got a real pet peeve about caravans. I find caravans and caravanning just an amazing phenomenon to observe, because there are all of these people in the developing world who are just dead keen to claw themselves out of poverty, and yet here in Australia there's a small group of people, but I suspect a growing one, who pay a very healthy six-figure sum to spend at least some of their lives living in what I could only categorise as a rolling form of third world poverty that we call caravanning. And I will never get it. And perhaps this is a character defect of mine, but I hate the way they drive. I hate the way they've become ridiculously heavy. And I hate the way so many people who inquire on my website about tow vehicles and things of that nature expect to tow a 3.5-ton caravan with impunity with their frickin' dual cab ute, which to me is just an affront to Newton's 3 laws of motion, seeing as that pig trailers are intrinsically unstable in pitch and yaw. The only thing restraining them is the inertia of the vehicle doing the towing, and obviously the more massive the caravan in relation to the size of the vehicle towing it, the more potential for the tow vehicle to be nudged off the road by the trailer becomes. And when you add all of this stuff up and you think about the opportunity cost, like the $150,000 that's been spent on the caravan and what else you might do with it, I am just never going to get that, Andrew. I'm just not. And maybe it's me.
Oh, it's not just you. I can't imagine. I mean, I've done a lot of touring in Australia, and every now and again, let's catch a chalet instead of camping tonight, and go and have a restaurant meal somewhere in the little town. And you go into the car park, which is adjacent to the little chalets, and there are 105 caravans that are all 40-something feet long, exactly what you're describing, parked cheek by jowl, so that they can walk down to the beach. I don't quite get the attraction, but you watch them, and most of them do have grey hair, like me. They look just like me, and they get together and then they talk about their tow hitches, and over supper, and their gas bottles. That's what they talk about. And I overhear this, and it makes me smile, because their main topic of conversation is going to be stability, tow hitches, and their toilets, and their disposable. And did you get rid of your toilet waste today? Oh yes, there's a deposit over there. And I really don't. And to be honest with you, let's stick to the toilet theme here. Honestly, one of the great, enjoyment things of life is to be in the bush in the middle of nowhere and dig a little hole and do your business with the stars or the wind in the grass or whatever, and there's nobody else around, and there's something, dare I say, spiritual about doing that. I'm sorry, it doesn't happen in a porta potty in a plastic box.
That's absolutely right. But just so that I'm reassured that you're singing broadly from this hymn book. And the other thing is, I'm also reassured because a few months ago, like, you know how the YouTube algorithm stalks you? Like, you're watching YouTube and YouTube is stalking you, and it's taking note of your preferences so that it can serve up the next video for you to watch with greater accuracy, right? So I hit refresh on the YouTube homepage and I get this suggested video, which is a caravan toilet comparison, chemical versus composting. And you know what? I had to click on it. So maybe that was an example of the AI, YouTube's AI being brilliant, but that I found that video compelling, but I'd have to say for all the wrong reasons.
You know what the algorithm does, of course? It looks at you and says, okay, he's got grey hair. All right, that's good. It puts him in the age bracket. He's in a workshop. He's got some tools behind him. Probably likes tinkering with things. I bet you he'd be interested in tinkering with a toilet. And I've never had one of those sent to me. Not about toilets, not yet. I will now, of course, after this has gone.
Yeah. I just question the philosophy where you buy an acoustically transparent aluminium box where the head of the dining table is also in the middle of the kitchen, but it's also in the bathroom so you can take a dump while you're having a shower. And if that's not already bad enough, you can take your effluent on tour around the outback. And intelligent extraterrestrial life is up there in geosynchronous orbit, right? They're probing. And they see this. And they look down and they go, they're not ready for first content yet. Still not ready. Not ready for first contact. Like, we'll give it a century.
Yeah.
Caravanning.
Yeah. Yes, they see that's the reason why. You've obviously watched Blackadder, Baldrick, the turn of the century, that whole thing, and they discover why the dinosaurs went extinct was actually Baldrick's trousers. So you're basically saying that the reason why extraterrestrial life has not made themselves known is because they see caravanners and they think they're just not ready. Is that what you're saying?
The human species is not ready yet because they're still doing that. They still think that's a good idea. You know? Perhaps in the future.
Good one to end on, John.
Well, it's always good to catch up. I enjoy our little chats, and I hope I didn't stray too far from the boundaries which you set at the outset. I tried to stay well inside.
Well, you
box,
pulled me back a couple of times.
Perhaps we'll just let your listeners decide.
Absolutely. Well, we will be back. You are a favourite on the show. Thank you again, John, for your time. Next time.
Yeah, no worries. I'll catch up with you soon, mate.
All right.